From the center of the universe and the home of your Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts, it's the Xs and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the Xs and Argos season finale, brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. Ben Grant, joined as always by JB as we wrap up 2023. On this episode, there's a surprising amount to talk about, especially since the Argos weren't in the Grey Cup game. We'll do a quick Grey Cup review. We haven't had a chance to go through the Argos that won the CFL awards. We'll give that a quick go through as well. We want to talk about the Chad Kelly concussion story, as well as McLeod Bethel Thompson potentially returning to the CFL. That broke this week. And then there are some transactions to go through, and we want to give you a little bit of a head start in terms of where we're looking for free agency. The Argos have a ton of free agents this year. Where would we start? Who absolutely needs to get signed? Plus, we've got our world famous Xs and Argos Awards to give away. All that more coming up on this episode of the Xs and Argos podcast. JB, it was a great Grey Cup game. I know both you and I were under the weather for the event, but it didn't at all take away from the enjoyment of it. That was a spectacular football game, I thought, start to finish.
Yeah, a worthy end. I mean, it was. I guess it was good to see Montreal win. But look, they echoed the Argos of last year. It was almost an identical kind of run in terms of adding players late and then really showing out in the final and then surprising Winnipeg. They did their bit.
Yeah, for sure. It felt very much like an Argos Grey Cup in a few different ways, but they deserved it. They played lights out from the day that Toronto clinched the first place in the East, September 15th. Like, they didn't lose another game after that. And we're the hottest team going in. And that's what we always say with the CFL playoffs is it doesn't really matter all season long. It's who gets hot at the right time. And they got hot at the right time. They were on fire by the time we got to the playoffs. And yeah, they ran over Toronto and then did just enough to get by Winnipeg. I want to talk about that last drive. We don't need to rehash the entire game, this not being an Alouettes or a Bombers pod, but that last drive, I wrote an article. If you haven't checked it out yet, you should. It's on 3 Down Nation. I went through that last drive from Montreal. I like to get your perspective on it. Being a defensive guy, I found myself sticking up for Winnipeg's defensive coordinator, Richie Hall. He got, as always happens when you lose in a late score, the defensive coordinator comes under fire, and especially so if there is some sort of controversial call. So that last touchdown, the touchdown to Tyson Philpott with 13 seconds left in the game, that won it for Montreal, and that was on a cover zero blitz where Richie Hall sent everybody. And I'm not a huge fan of cover zero blitzes. When the game's on the line. I'm not like a Greg Williams fan or Wink Martindale or any of those guys that just live and die by the blitz. However, in that scenario, they had tried everything else on that drive, and to me, I don't think there was anything else left, because I think there was time for 2 plays. If that what ended up being a touchdown, if that had fallen incomplete, Montreal's still running another play. There's still 13 seconds left, and they don't need to stop the clock because it's CFL. The clock can wind. That's fine. They can run their guys out there to kick a field goal. So I just think in that scenario, Fajardo was on fire. He was like 7 of 8 at that point for like 77 yards, a touchdown. He had missed nothing, and they sent 3. They sent 4. They tried press. They tried zone. They tried man, and nothing was working. Fajardo was just hot, and so Richie Hall took matters into his own hands, sent everybody, and yeah, he lost. But can you imagine, like, if they'd sat back and just sent 3 and Fajardo had thrown a touchdown pass, which I think he probably would have, or at least if not on that play, the next one, he would be ripped for that. Like, why aren't you going after? Why just sitting back and letting Montreal take the Grey Cup from you? So I like the call. As a DC, how do you like that call?
Well, I mean, blitzing is... people get excited for blitzes, but blitzes are really risky. You usually blitz when your defense cannot get the job done. So now you have to kind of gamble because you're just playing straight up. You can't ball with the team that you're balling with usually. It's one of the reasons why you blitz. Yeah, I feel bad. I mean, I think, Fajardo had made two really nice passes in that final drive. Um, and I think that that they really probably felt like that they had been figured out, like that they were not getting home with 3 and 4, and that Fajardo knew who to look for, and that happens sometimes in the fourth quarter of games. Is whatever your plan was has been figured out, and now you've got a problem. So I didn't hate the position of it's like a good place in the field to call zero. Um, I would have loved the DBs to be a little bit deeper on that play. If you're going zero there rather than necessarily, trying to, like, I would prefer maybe to come downhill a little bit more. But yeah, I think, look, it was a gamble to get home, and he made a nice throw. I think that's just football. I can't really kill him for that. I mean, the loss came earlier when they were still in a football game with Montreal on the final drive. I mean, if you're Winnipeg, you should have felt like that game was put away before that in terms of talent on paper. So I think the game being in the lurch in the final drive, it is a very lonely place as defensive coordinator. I will say that for sure. So I always feel bad for coordinators when they're taking on water at the end and they just can't seem to stop the leaking. And full credit to Fajardo. He knew the zero was coming. He hit his guy, and then he threw a great touchdown throw to make up for that. Even after that throw, I mean, it was. I give more credit to Fajardo than I do saying it being a defensive mistake. I don't think it was a mistake. I think it was just football.
And Philpott as well. Like, what a catch on that as well. Like, it was perfect route, perfect catch, perfect throw, everything. Because Demerio Houston recovered nicely. Like, Philpott beat him on such a good route. He stemmed inside, got position, faked a jab outside, because he was the only receiver out there. So Houston had the entire half field on his own. That was it. Like, he was on an island, and he had to watch corners and outs. And so that little jab step, that was a killer, but he recovered somehow. He just missed getting a hand on the ball by like a couple inches somehow, but it was just a perfectly placed ball. Great route, great catch. It was just, it was one of those things. And like you said, point the finger at the Winnipeg offense. They scored once in the second half. If you're looking to point fingers, there are plenty of places. And I'm not saying the defense was perfect. They had their issues. And I don't think Coach Hall necessarily called a perfect game, but I think putting the loss on him for that cover zero call is misplaced.
Right, exactly. Like, that's just football. You can't complain about that. There's there are times where you might call a defensive call ridiculous, but I mean, that was perfectly legitimate to call for a zero rush there. If you're looking at position of the field and the previous plays and the success they were having, I mean, I think it's a very defendable call.
Let's get into those CFL awards. The Argos did extremely well in this. It was just such a painful reminder, though, with the Argos not being in the Grey Cup this week and just seeing them crush everybody in the CFL awards. And you're like, this was such a good team. And even when watching the game, like, there's no doubt that Toronto was a better team than both of those teams out there, but it doesn't matter. That's the thing. Like, I think, Winnipeg was a better team last year and Toronto won. That happens. Toronto was the best team this year, and Montreal crushed them. They deserved every bit of that win. And you look at that game, you're like, yeah, Toronto could be here, but that's football. You got one shot, and they weren't there for the game that mattered. So Montreal deserved it. But yeah, it was painful. And watching those Argos come up on stage to sweep the award show, we'll go through them quickly. So most outstanding rookie went to Qantas Stiggers. I love that. Like, I didn't think there was any chance Kai Gray was going to win that. He was the West representative. If anything, his battle was in the East with Reggie Stubblefield, who had also a great Grey Cup after having a great East final. I think if that vote happens at the end of the season instead of before the playoffs, you end up with a different result, because I think Reggie Stubblefield opened a lot of people's eyes. And I don't think Stiggers was amazing. I'm not sure he had the highlights that Stubblefield had, and that may have won over voters. But I think Stiggers absolutely deserved Rookie of the Year. We called that early in the season, and I'm standing by that. So really excited to see him win. Is any chance he's back next year, JB?
I don't think so. I can't imagine he doesn't get some NFL camp invites
He's so young, right?
and some practice squad looks, but you never know. You never know. I mean, I know Peters jumped around and he's a bit older but you never know what the NFL thinks. I mean, I certainly don't know what they think.
I know, neither do I.
So yeah, it's possible. Yeah, I do think it's possible, but probably not.
Most outstanding special teams player was Javon Leake. Again, I didn't think the competition was really there for him in the end. I think Boris Beatty was the best competitor because he was such, he was in such a battle in every facet of special teams. But Javon Leake being one touchdown off a CFL record, I thought made that one really easy. And I was happy to see him, especially after especially the way it was almost more for. It was almost more for the Argos special teams unit as a whole to be represented like that. Like that's what it was, because it's not Javon Leake up there getting that award. It is, but it's the blocking, it's everything else that goes along with it. That is a team award as much as there can be a team award. So I was really happy for the guys and for Mickey Donovan. I thought that was well deserved. Most outstanding offensive lineman, Deshaun Allen won. And again, I'm not sure the right guy was up against him. I think if he'd gone up against Jarrell Broxton, maybe that's closer, but he wasn't even in the running at all. That said, Allen was without question the best offensive lineman. And now he's a name. Now he's a guy that people have known about. One of my worries with him early on was he was just sort of quietly went about his job. It was great to get the backing. Like, we've been saying it for a couple of years, but it was great to get the backing of PFF, who came in there and was like, yeah, Allen's in a different world here, because that's what we had been seeing. That was the eye test. And to get a little bit of validation there, I thought was huge. And it was great to see, he's such a character and a great guy and deserved that award. So yeah, I was thrilled to see Allen pick that up. Most outstanding defensive player was the one the Argos did not win. They also didn't win most outstanding Canadian, but they didn't have a nomination there. Darius Pickett was the Argos nomination for most outstanding defensive player. Matthew Betts won it. He had 1 billion sacks. JB, where do you stand on a Darius Pickett's loss?
Well, I mean, with due respect to Monsieur Betts, I just don't think there's, I think it's tough to beat a Canadian when they're competing in a non-Canadian role. People love sacks the way they love interceptions. I think there's no comparison in terms of what Pickett does on the football field and the multitude of jobs that he's given on the defense to do. Far exceeds Betts and his combo sacks. But, who am I to begrudge some Canadian guy on the West Coast getting a bunch of sacks?
And it sort of goes, but it does actually give our rule a bit of a problem. Like, our rule is, well, would you trade this player for this player? And I think even as much as Darius Pickett is one of the...
You would trade Pickett for Betts?
I wouldn't, but I think there's a conversation because Betts is Canadian, but that's where it makes it a bit unfair, right? Because you've got to have not just a Canadian starter at defensive end, but an elite Canadian starter at defensive end. Like, he is Matthew Betts, regardless of what you think of sacks and where they come from and what their value is, he is one of the best defensive ends in the league. There's no question about that. And so to have that as a Canadian spot, it is really valuable. And so I wouldn't personally make that deal, because I think Pickett is, I think he's among the best defensive players in the league without question every year. And so for me, it's not worth it. But I think there's a conversation because Betts is Canadian. If he's not, it's easy. It's Pickett for sure.
I mean, it's a career year for Betts too, right? I mean, is he ever going to get to those numbers again? Probably not.
The odds are no, but he's good though. He's a good player.
Yeah, he is good, but I don't know. To me, it's like a guy's hits 50 home runs one season. You're like, okay, and they get his flowers, but then we'll all move on with acknowledging who the better player was.
And then most outstanding player, Chad Kelly over Brady Oliveira. I didn't think Chad was going to win that. I really honestly thought Brady Oliveira would win. And I understand why. people would vote for Oliver. I think he had an outstanding season, but I like him more for his ability to pass protect. I'm not a big believer in a huge amount of running back yardage being attributed to running backs. Some of it is, and I think Oliveira is among the best running backs in the league. But the value of that to me is not the same as, it's nowhere close. And so again, to an argument, well, what does most outstanding mean? It's not valuable. That's different. But to me, this was easily Chad Kelly. Said that from the start.
Credit to the voters. I thought I guess, they only had room for one Canadian narrative in the awards. So Betts took that title, and they went with quarterback over running back.
Yeah, and I think that was the right call. Coach of the year was Ryan Dinwiddie, and his speech, like he didn't seem that interested in it, and I don't think he meant it in a disrespectful way, but you could just tell seeing him. He was feeling, I think, what we were feeling as the award show was going on. Probably look at this talent. He's like this is not the award I wanted this year. Like we should have been holding up that Grey Cup, and it was on his face. But I think you have to. And I hope he will. I hope he is able to look back at this and recognize what a great job he and his staff did. Because regardless of how it ended, he has been deserving of conversation since he arrived in Toronto, since he became a head coach. It's only his third season as a head coach. All 3 seasons he won the division. Once he won a Grey Cup. Twice he got to the East Final. He's got an outstanding record, absolutely deserving of this with a historic season. He's now in the record books, tied with the unfortunate Edmonton team from 1989, who also shares the distinction of being 16-2 with the best record, but not advancing to the Grey Cup. And that's a team that, very similarly had a most outstanding player in Tracy Ham, I believe won Coach of the Year as well. And so, unfortunate path to follow, but I think Dinwiddie will be able to at some point look back on this and recognize that, man, this was an outstanding season and worthy of his Coach of the Year win. Let's move into some of the other conversations that we've got to address here. The Chad Kelly concussion story is a really interesting one to me. I think before we talk about anything else, I think it is really important that listeners, viewers understand it is critical that any football player that says they have a concussion is believed and listened to. That is extremely important. Football players typically don't volunteer that. It's not something that a lot of football players, especially at the pro level, want people knowing, want out there. Concussions are there's not much worse that can happen to you in terms of your future and the way that you're regarded by organizations and stuff. And if you've got a player coming forward in a culture where concussions are hidden, and despite the encouragement and what players are taught and what they know, they hide symptoms, they don't report. And to have someone come forward and say, I got a concussion, you've got to take that as truth. I think that's really important. Now, I know the whole thing sounded weird. Everything about it was weird. The timing of it was weird. The fact that Coach Dinwiddie found out from his wife, who had read it on 3 Down Nation, and 3 Down were the guys that broke that story. It was the Hodge and JC and Dunk out at the Grey Cup break that story. It was their interview they were doing where he talked about this. It all sounds so weird, but it explains a lot. And I think, like I said, I don't think you can doubt a player that comes forward and says that. Are you on the same page with me, JB?
I don't know where you're going with it. Like,
well, I think there are a lot. So what I'm saying is there are a lot of people that are saying Chad Kelly didn't have a concussion. He's making that up to explain a bad game.
That's of course idiotic.
Yeah, and but it's not just idiotic. It's a terrible mentality to have. You can't. It's just such a dangerous thing to get into where you're like, you say you had concussion, I don't believe you, because that's not going to incentivize people to come forward in the future, and that's a dangerous precedent. We want to encourage players to come forward with head injuries and with symptoms and report.
It's a more complicated conversation at the professional level. Because if you're a professional player, just talking generally, if you're a professional player and you feel off, should you tell your coaches and report it? Yes, but that of course will immediately rule you out for the game. So if you're not sure, like maybe I don't feel off, right? Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's just the adrenaline. Maybe, it's a tricky situation, I know, for a player, because you can't unring that bell. So if you feel like there's something kind of making you feel unbalanced, you're not sure what it is. And then in retrospect, you think about the next day, and now the symptoms are really clear, and you have a headache, or you have the other sort of more known concussion symptoms, then it is what it is. I think that is for sure something that would be a challenge for a professional athlete, in that at the time you didn't really recognize the symptoms, but after it's over and then the next day when they worsened, you clearly could recognize what happened. And there's certainly lots of evidence to support that there was a player who had problems on the field, like we talked about. Like, there was clearly something very, very wrong, and it didn't have the traditional concussion symptoms of dizziness or unable to stand and that sort of thing, but there are a multitude of symptoms. So I think anybody who's suggesting that this is convenient, I don't think Chad Kelly talking about playing with a concussion is convenient to anybody. I think it's courageous that he's willing to talk about that he felt, that he probably, in retrospect was concussed, and is willing to talk about that. And that's something that every football player should be able to talk about. It shouldn't be a secret. I think it was just, people are still living in 1987 in a lot of ways. And I think that's too bad for everybody. But, it makes sense to me. I think there's a lot to support it. And, there's not much you can do after the fact, other than, just you have to hope that players will share symptoms during the game. But sometimes symptoms aren't that clear, and there's nothing you can do. It's just how it goes down.
Sometimes there are none. Sometimes it's days later and you actually start experiencing symptoms. And that, it actually made me wonder, because I've gone back through that game. I wanted to find, where was the play? What am I missing? And there were a couple plays that I thought, that could have been it. There's the one that really stands out is, it was actually the pick to Sankey, although I think that, may have been earlier than that. But yeah, he comes down really hard. He gets hit by Mustafa Johnson and hits his head on the turf. But there were a few plays in the first half where it could have happened. But it's also possible that it wasn't even that game, that it was earlier in the week. There's so many different things. Concussions are weird. Everyone's different. Everyone responds differently to concussions. But even that same person, each concussion with them is different. We know so little about it. And I think football leagues like to sort of pretend they've got a handle on this and like, well, we know what to do. We don't know how to evaluate concussions, how to treat them. They really don't. There's not much evidence to suggest that there are accurate concussion tests or anything like that.
There is no test, right? Like, a test doesn't exist. So that when they talk about that, given a concussion test, I mean, you can check for symptoms, and you can check for signs. And if you have those, you can suggest that there is likely a concussion, but there's certainly no blood test or eye test or any sort of test that allows you to rule out a concussion. And it puts the player in a terrible position, because if they go, if they go to a coach and they say that they feel like they're feeling off, and then okay, now they're ruled out, and now fans are yelling about, why would they go to a coach? Why would they not tough it out? Why would they not do this, do that? If you don't say anything and you play, but you're only playing with sort of 30% of your capability, well, then you run into other problems, right? So it's a no-win situation for the player when they're in a concussed situation, and I'm glad, that Chad told everybody what it was, and people are able to understand the reason behind the performance. It seems very logical to me.
And I don't think there's blame to go around anywhere. I don't blame the concussion spotter. I don't, because you go back I still don't know where it is. So it's not like they missed some sort of huge hit to the helmet and they're like, why didn't he get checked?
Right. Like when you watch on TV, there's certainly no outward, obvious, sign, whether it's like holding the head or slow to get off the ground. But that doesn't mean, that doesn't mean anything. I agree with you. I think it's just a tough scenario and a tough situation. And, the more honesty we have about it, the better. And, I think that's all there is to it. I don't think there's any excuses being made. It's just, this is what went down. And, sometimes that's what happens and you lose a game.
Sticking with quarterbacks, McLeod Bethel-Thompson may be returning to the CFL. That was a story that was floating around this week at Grey Cup. What do you think about this? There's a couple options. Certainly there are teams like McLeod Bethel-Thompson. We know he's an excellent CFL quarterback. We had the pleasure of watching him up close and personal. And we know what he can do. And there are a number of teams unsettled at the quarterback position. I think you can look at Ottawa, you can look at Hamilton, you can look at Saskatchewan for starters. And maybe you can look at Calgary. McLeod Bethel-Thompson will be in demand if he decides, I am going to give it another go. And people say, well, isn't he getting up there in age? He is, but he's the same age as Zach Collaros. He's younger, certainly, than Trevor Harris. Yeah, he's, what is he, 30, 35, I think? I think Collaros and he are both 35.
I mean, I don't know where he wants to live, but certainly Hamilton strikes me as a pretty good scenario for him if he wants to come and play one more season.
I don't want to have to go up against McLeod Bethel-Thompson.
Well, I'm not in favor of it. I'm just saying, it's the GTA. I can't imagine that he necessarily wants to go live in Saskatchewan. But, if Coach Mace is there, maybe it's a conversation.
And that doesn't look like it's happening either. It looks like the front runners aren't going to be from Toronto way at all. Which is, it's foolish, I think, on Saskatchewan's part. But they're all over the map. I have no idea where they're going to go. You've got former kickers coming in, and you've got NFL guys that are in the mix, and then all the usual suspects. But I don't know where they're going to go with that. But it doesn't sound like, unless they've kept it really quiet, it doesn't sound like it's going to be Coach Mace. Once they kept
their general manager, I was like, okay.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, like, okay. Well, I guess we'll see you in 3 years from now when you really start to rebuild. It's like, well, we want to rebuild the house, but only the left side. Okay. Well, that's a good idea. That'll
but we'll see what the roster looks like. It's the CFL is so weird. Like, go back to Montreal when you had Montreal 8th in your first power ranking. I had them 9th in my first power ranking out of 9, and they just won the Grey Cup. So teams can turn around quickly, but I don't like the direction that Saskatchewan's heading in right now. And we were both fairly high on Saskatchewan coming into this year, but it just felt like everything went wrong. I don't know. I don't know if I would go into that situation. Although, again, it'd be a different feel. Like you can be the king in Saskatchewan if you're playing good football at quarterback for the Rough Riders. You don't get much higher in the CFL in terms of the way you're appreciated. But I don't know. I'm with you. I think I would see Hamilton or perhaps Ottawa over Saskatchewan, Calgary. But I don't know. I'm excited to see him. I hope he does come back to the CFL. I would like to see Bethel-Thompson do it all over again. So, hoping, but also not looking forward to the Argos having to play him 5 times a season. So we'll see. And continuing with the theme of Argos or former Argos quarterbacks, Ben Holmes signed with the Vienna Vikings. We remember Ben Holmes from the preseason, of course, last year as well. I really like Ben Holmes as a player. I was hoping he would get another shot. His preseason was so rough in Toronto this year. It just nothing went right for him. He's a better quarterback than that looked. And he outclasses the Vienna Vikings. There's no question, but he just needs to play and maybe get another chance down the road. But not a story we need to spend a lot of time on, but we're getting into transactions now. I just thought that was cool. JC Abbott passed that one on to me, and I thought, I gotta talk about that and bring that up because he was always really good with me. Re-signings and signings. So let's talk about some of the re-signings first. We're going to get into some free agents a little bit later. The Argos with a ton, like when you include the practice squad guys that all need to be re-signed, they're like 41 or 42 free agents out there. It's a problem, but they're not on their own. There are a lot of teams with huge free agent lists this year. You don't have to look that far to find teams in similar predicaments, but good to see some of the re-signings start. And so guys that were re-signed, so fullback Spencer Nickel, receivers BJ Bird and Aaron Parker, Braden Knoll, the offensive lineman, and then also two players from this year's draft, Anthony Vandal and Ife Onyamenem, both back. Linebacker Brandon Murphy, who was, remember, he was injured. He was drafted this year. Was he a 6th round pick, I think, this year out of Western, but he was injured. And so we knew this year would be a rehab year, but he's been brought back. So that's a good start. And they brought in 2 new guys as well, Jordan Bird and Nelson Jordan. Jordan Bird, I'm kind of interested in. This one intrigues me. So he was with the Pittsburgh Steelers most recently, played running back in college, but at 170 pounds was too small to be an NFL running back, tried out receiver there. He's a kick return specialist, but I think in the CFL, you go back to that sort of slash role. You start looking at, okay, receiver, running back combo as a returner. I like getting him in the building, and I think of him, they're built very differently, even though they're both undersized. They're very different sort of undersized. Jordan Bird's taller and lighter than Deonta McMahon, but Deonta McMahon is a great complement to a power back, and I think you bring in Jordan Bird, he might be a similar kind of guy. So I'm excited about that signing. Nelson Jordan, the defensive lineman, I don't get enough out of it yet. I've only seen just a little bit of film, and there's nothing that really jumped out to me. But it's the season. Start signing guys, and by the time we get to camp, we're gonna have 100 guys that are on the Argos roster. And yeah, it starts now with signing these guys and bringing these other guys back. So yeah, it begins. All right, JB, into free agents. I want to kind of go through this list because I don't know if Argos fans understand how many players are up, whose contracts are up. It's a bigger problem on defense than offense, but it's a problem. So let's go through it. Quarterbacks, nobody. Everybody's under contract. Everybody can return. They can bring back Kelly, Dukes, Scott if they wish. And I think we'll see all 3 of those guys in camp. Running backs, things start to get a bit more interesting. We know Andrew Harris is up, but he's going to be retiring. We know that he's got a job lined up for next year out on Vancouver Island. AJ Ouellette is up, and that one is going to be big because he's going to be expensive because he's really good. And the Argos are going to have to make a very tough decision on that. I would love to see him back. We'll get into more detail on that a bit later. Javon Leake also, his contract's up too. And going back to the bringing in Bird, maybe that's a bit of an insurance policy there too. For receivers, Dejon Brissett, DeMonte Coxie, Tommy Neild, Richard Sindani, Cam Phillips. That's a bunch of big names at receiver. Offensive line, not the starters except for Darius Sirocco, but Dylan Giffen joining him, Shane Richards, Trevion Tate, Darius Bladek. Their contracts are all up. Now over to the defensive side of the ball. Issues. Dwayne Hendricks, Sean Oakman, Thomas Costigan, Brandon Barlow on the defensive line. That's a chunk. Linebacker, even bigger issues. Jack Cassar, Trevor Hoyt, Jonathan Jones, Wynton McManus, Adarius Pickett, Enoch Mwamba. I'm going off 3 Down Nation's list because they've got the best compiled list of this. Theirs is better than my own individual Argo tracking. So I would go there to look. I actually think Jordan Williams is up too, but I don't know that for sure. I got to confirm that. But basically, every linebacker that the Argonauts have is up. In the defensive backfield, it's not as bad, but still some huge pieces. Robertson Daniel, Jamal Peters, Jamie Harry, Maurice Carnell, Robert Priester, and then Boris Beatty as a specialist. JB, that is a list. And let's not forget to add in all of the practice squad players, of course. That's, Jeremiah Hedel and Falola, Eric Sutton, Benji Franklin, all those guys as well. Are you worried right now that the Argos only have 4 guys on their current roster? Obviously, I'm exaggerating.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think look, this is very CFL-y. I mean, CFL does have big roster turnover. So it's not, I don't think it's an emergency. But there are going to be choices to be made, and there are going to be guys that are going to get offered big money from other teams. So yeah, it is concerning that there won't be that we're not bringing the band back because it just isn't possible. A lot of those guys are going to be expensive, and they'll do a great job of identifying who's kicking around on other teams to try and bring in. But yeah, it is unfortunate because you don't feel like any change is needed. You really feel like you'd love to bring the band back for one more year. I mean, maybe they can convince a few more than normal to give it one more shot.
Maybe it's going to be tough because like all those guys are going to be so expensive, because that's what the problem with playing on a good team is that this happens, right? Like you get picked apart because everybody looks even better than they are. These are good players. They looked even better than they were because they're surrounded by other great players. And so people are going to probably pay more than everybody's worth, but I don't blame the players. Should absolutely get that money. They should go take the money, whatever that's being offered.
Credit to the organization. They certainly have not in any way shown that money is a something that's going to prevent them from putting together the best team. Yeah. So I'm confident that they will make decisions on what they think will be best for the team, and that they're not going to be tied by a budget. They certainly haven't shown that, and so I would have no reason to believe that.
Let's take a look at O&D here and highlight three guys that we think need to be absolute number one priorities. So I'll start on the offensive side of the ball. The three guys that stand out to me when I look at that list, number one, I think, and I'll even put these in order. I think number one, which is so weird to me, I think it is Darius Sirocco. I think like Darius had such a good season this year. I wasn't expecting that. I didn't even think he was going to be a starter at the beginning of the year. I had him as a backup center because I had Nicastro at center and I had Hunter and Bladek on either side of guard. But with Bladek's injury, Nicastro was forced to play guard, and he excelled there. He was fantastic at guard. We knew he could be, but I thought Darius Sirocco outplayed Nicastro at center too. I thought, Nicastro's snaps were a little bit of an issue as well. And he's just playing such outstanding guard that to me, I think you want to bring that line back intact. You've got Allen back and Cage back and Hunter and Nicastro. If they can bring back Darius Sirocco, he's going to cost a lot more than he did this year because he's an all-star. And that's going to be tough. But to me, that is the number one priority on offense. Number two, DeMonte Coxey. He was so clutch this season. He and Chad Kelly obviously have a really good rapport together. When Chad Kelly needed someone to make a play, Coxey stepped up. And to see him out there as a free agent, that scares me because those guys aren't necessarily easy to find. Guys that your quarterback is going to immediately pick up and sort of say, yeah, we've got it. We have a sense for each other. He and Chad Kelly, knowing Chad Kelly is going to be your quarterback, I think you got to find a way to bring back Coxey. And then my third guy is AJ Ouellette. And I feel weird with this because I'm not typically a running backs guy. I think AJ is a must bring back for a couple of reasons. And none have anything to do with him being able to run the football, despite the fact that he's one of the best at doing so. He's a great pass protector. Pass protection is huge in a pass-first offense, which every CFL offense is, but especially with Chad Kelly back there, you need AJ Ouellette in his pass protection. Number two, the energy that he brings and the way he's able to fire up guys. He affects the team in a way that is sort of hard to quantify. And while I'm not a fan of paying running backs big money, because I think, just analytics-wise, I don't think that makes sense to me. He's going to get a lot of money somewhere, and he should take the most money. He should take whoever's offering the most. He should do that. And I don't think that will be Toronto, but I think that would be a huge loss if he goes elsewhere. I hope he doesn't. I would love to see him here for another season, but I'm not 100% convinced that we'll see AJ Ouellette back here next year. JB, any thought on my three guys, or tough to say?
No, I think those are all really good choices. In my mind, I see if McLeod comes back, is there a Curly Gittins trade? I thought that kind of floated around when you're talking about Cooksey. No, I think all three are crucial crucial sign. I mean, I think everybody we're going to talk about is crucial. I mean, I think that unlike last year where there were probably kind of more boutique conversations, I think you're talking about, load supporting walls here, pillars. So I think, yeah, I agree with you. I think all three of those guys have to come back.
What are you thinking for the defensive side of the ball?
Well, I think it's even more drastic on defense, to be honest. It's not that hard. It certainly isn't hard to come up with three, because I could come up with eight on the defensive side that we really want. If you look defensively, I think that you would offer McManus. My number one guy I want to bring back is McManus. I think you want to offer him a big deal, and really hope that he wants to put it together here. He is approaching the end of his career, but I think if you were to offer him a really great 1-year deal, depending on what he's looking for, I think that's a potential thing there, where you could say, like, come back for one more year. I think teams will offer him a lot of money. I'm sure Edmonton will. So that'll be a tough conversation. So for me, he's number one. I think McManus, you want to sign. He is the heart of that defense. He is the dog of that defense. He is more than just a superb middle of the field player, especially with Mwamba, I'm sure, moving on to broadcasting. I really, really want them to sign McManus, but I get where there are conversations about how much money and how much term you want to offer. So hopefully that doesn't get complicated. My second guy I'm looking is right beside him is Pickett. They did not get Pickett extended. I'm sure that they have, that's a lot to spend on linebacker, but I just don't see how you can let Pickett leave. He was the best defensive player in the league. You don't have somebody who can come in and do that. I think you offer him a couple of years, and it's a lot to spend at linebacker, but I really hope that they do, and then maybe you can make some savings a couple other places if you have to. But I would really hope that Pickett is a priority, because teams are definitely going to offer him a lot of money and a lot of term. And yeah, I really hope that they can bring Pickett back. And then my third guy, again, there's lots of great defensive linemen. I thought Costigan was amazing all season. Barlow was fantastic. Oakman, I really do hope that they can get not a hometown discount, but maybe I'd like to stay in Toronto deal with Oakman. But if I had to pick the one I really want is Hendricks. I think that they can get Hendricks for a decent price, because there will be teams offering him money, but I don't think he's going to get offered Pickett money, because I think that teams still know that their fans are like, what? Hendricks? Who? How much? I think it's a tougher sell for a GM to sell somebody who is not sort of a flashy defensive lineman. So I think they kind of get a break there with Hendricks. And they can get him for like a good price. So those are my three. If they can come back with those three, I can live with whatever else they have to do to make tough decisions.
I think you're spot on. And on Hendricks, I think that's an astute comment. That's absolutely right, because I think every GM in the league knows the value of Hendricks, but the fan bases don't. Toronto is the only fan base that knows how valuable Hendricks is, because he's just not, it's not that kind of player. We talked before about sacks being misleading, everything else. The stuff Hendricks doesn't get noticed by most fans in the league. Argos fans know.
Maybe Montreal comes looking for him. That would be my only concern.
Yeah, I don't know what the contract status is of their interior. Like they had a great interior, obviously, but Yeah, I guess it would be an East team that saw what a disruptor he was. But man, he's a good player, and I do think he's going to be a steal. Even though he's gonna get paid, there's no question. But yeah, he should probably get more than he's going to end up getting, just because he's a harder sell to the fans, like you said. And it's unfortunate. It's just it's the nature of his style of play. It's like that sometimes. And then Pickett McManus. Yeah, I think it's going to have to be multi-years for McManus. He's going to be turning 30 mid-season next year. Pickett's a couple years younger. I think he turns 27. He turns 28 next year. And so, but I think both those guys have a couple years left, and I think you need them. There's nobody, especially Pickett, but honestly, I don't. There's not a good replacement for McManus. Those guys are both among the best players in the league defensively. I don't know who you replace McManus with. I don't think there is anyone you replace Pickett with. So I think those two guys they're. I think you have them in the right order as well. If there's any debate, it's maybe putting Pickett first, just because.
Yeah, you have. I think you just have to sign those guys.
I don't know. That's tough. So those are your priorities. Get to it, Argos front office. We want all these guys by Christmas.
Yeah, it wasn't very complicated to pick the best three. I will humbly suggest.
JB, it's time for our Xs and Argos Awards that I know everyone's been looking forward to all year long. Yes. We've gone to a slightly different format. No, nobody was looking forward to this, but we do it every year, and we'll do it again. A slightly different format this year. This year, we've decided to do nomination style. So, JB, you have nominations that I'm not aware of, and I have some nominations here for each of our awards that we decided on, and some of them are different, some of them are the same. Let's go through it. So, player most in need of a nickname, JB, who do you have?
Yeah, it wasn't. I mean, I do love my nicknames, but I went with Pierce. I think Mason Pierce is going to be a big player for the Argos next year, and I think he deserves a nickname to go with kind of that increased heat he got.
Yeah, I agree. And being like Colorado School of Mines, like there's so many possibilities you can go there. Mining themed nicknames. I think there's some good ones. I went with Dejan Allen because I think he just sort of quietly goes about his job. I feel like a nickname might, amp up his
and
recognition.
Never get nicknames.
I know. That's why I like it. Like I want something in, he was a Hawaii Warrior, right? So maybe there's something you can incorporate in there. I don't know. Something about warriors or rainbows or I don't know. Hawaiian. I don't know. But there's a potential there. But if we have to make a call between those two, I think your suggestion is better. I will give you Mason Pierce for most in need of a nickname. So that is our award winner. And
then over the offseason, I'll see what I can come up with.
Yeah, you come up with something good because we still don't really have it for Javon Leake. We tried. And I know some of yours are good. CN Power, that's great.
I feel like the Lakeshore Express did not get the time it needed to breathe.
The Lakeshore Express. Well, first of all, because it's Lakeshore Boulevard, but yeah, I get the train. I don't know. Anyway, what was your AJ Olette nickname? Oh, Juggernaut, right? Yeah, that works well too.
That good.
All right, most underrated Toronto Argonaut. For this, I went with Dwayne Hendricks. I don't think there's anyone close to him in terms of being underrated because I think he's among the best linemen in the league, and he's certainly not getting that kind of respect league-wide. So that was an easy one for me. Where'd you go for that award?
Yeah, I think you and I both talked about that a lot. He's certainly not the most underrated on the Xs and Argos podcast. I didn't go Hendricks because I felt like we had sort of said that so many times. I went McFadden.
I can see it. I like McFadden a lot.
I thought he played fantastic. I thought he was physical. I thought he was ball hawking. I thought he played just tremendously and did not get much pub and wasn't really recognized league-wide as a key defensive back. And even among Argo fans, I don't think necessarily he'd be one of the first defensive backs you might mention. I thought McFadden needed a little more recognition for how valuable he was to the defense.
I would like to see one more year of that from McFadden. We've seen it from Hendricks for several years now. And I think that's why we probably have to give him the nod on this one, because
I agree.
It's been a few years in a row. And I know, like, I appreciate you thinking outside the box there. But yeah, I think Dwayne Hendricks wins the award for most underrated Argo. Future All-Star, for me, easy. Mason Pierce. He would have been an All-Star had he played 2 or 3 more games. He was playing lights out football from the moment he took over for the injured halfbacks. And a couple more games under his belt. He's just going to get better and better and better. So that's my nominee. Where are you going for future All-Star?
I think, well, I'm not to get too grim, but I think if one of those linebackers leaves or McManus leaves, I think Jonathan Jones becomes a starter, and I think he's a potential All-Star.
He is. I don't mind that. I think they're. I don't know. I think that's. I think he is. I mean,
he's not a replacement, and he's not the same player, but he is very, very good. And I think, given full-time starter reps, I think he might really show people.
The playmaker, as Hoagie calls him, the playmaker, Jonathan Jones. I think we got to go with Mason Pierce there, just because he has had those starts and has put up those numbers and really did get league awareness in doing so. Like, people know who Mason Pierce is. I think the school helps, but he made some real highlight reel plays. So I could see him. I could see him being an All-Star next season. So we will give the Future All-Star award to Mason Pierce. Clutch Award. Who is your guy for the Clutch Award?
It could have been a couple of different guys, but I thought, for me, Oakman. I thought all season, when they absolutely needed a sack or they absolutely needed a stand or things were sort of starting to shift against them, Oakman came up huge with the big play. I thought that was, he wasn't somebody who necessarily was sort of, like he would flash on and off, but when they needed a big play, I really hope they're able to keep him too, because I felt that he had a real knack for getting a sack when they needed it.
There's no one else in the league like Oakman. You notice that? Like, I'm not saying he's the best in the league, but there's no one else like him. Like, he's a pretty different interior player.
My father, who unfortunately I'm currently investigating buying a Alouettes mock CFL Grey Cup for, as he is an Alouettes fan, complained to me during the East Final that Oakman was too big to play in the CFL.
What does that mean? He's very large. He's very big.
He felt he was too big. So, like, well, okay, that's fair.
Yeah, no, he's very large. I don't know about too large to play in the CFL, but yes, he's a very big. But he's different. But he's got no fat on him, right? Like, he's a huge man. He's over 300 pounds, 6'9", and he's like chiseled, which just doesn't happen to a lot of human beings. So he's just different, and he's got like this burst on the inside, but he's also got power and size, mass. So yeah, he's made some centers look just like terrible. So I get that for your Clutch Award. Mine's DeMonte Coxie. And the reason I'm nominating him is that both those wins in Montreal, which were tough fought wins, 2 of the hardest games that Toronto had to play all season long in Montreal, Coxie, when a play needed to be made, one hand or two, he found a way to make it. And so that's my nomination. I'm going to need you to break this tie here. Who should this award go to between Coxie and CN Power?
Well, I see that my other ones were overruled, but I will give you Coxie because I thought he definitely had some huge final drive catches and touchdowns. So I think he just edges out Oakman. And
that one, and the one-headed catch in the end zone to win the game is like that. That's the play of the year. That's the CFL play of the regular season. So I have trouble going against him. The biggest jump award. So Argo that made the biggest jump for me was a guy we've already talked about, Tavares McFadden, because he wasn't really a guy we were thinking about too much once Jamal Peters came back. We were thinking about him when Peters wasn't there. We think it'd be McFadden and who else would join him. And then Stiggers stepped up and played well. But then when Peters came back, we're like, oh, okay, we don't have to think about McFadden anymore. Now it's Stiggers and Peters. McFadden came back into the field when the halfbacks got hurt. he was even better as a halfback than he was as a corner. And he was already a good corner, but he went from like a ball hawk, which we'd always known, like that's at Florida State throughout his career. That's what he was. He was sort of, I don't know, I don't want to insult him by saying a finesse guy, but he was sort of looked like a finesse guy to me, despite his size and weight. And he's great hands, great at picking the ball off. When he went to halfback, he was a menace. Like he was physical, just crushed players. Every game there was a huge hit where he came flying in and just like absolutely annihilated some poor receiver. And that was a level that I hadn't seen from him previously. So that's my biggest jump award winner nominee. Who are you nominating?
I thought he did well. For me, it's Adebayo. I thought that when he got his shot at being the running back in those September games, he really impressed me. I thought he looked light and fast. I thought when he was given the chance to be the running back, he looked like he could handle that as the backup. And, he's always been a great special teamer, but you never really know. And I thought this year he made a big jump. I thought he went from being a special teamer to a guy who's on a progression to be a starter.
I agree with everything you said, but again, the sample size is so small. Like he really only got those carries in a couple games. And so I think we have to go with McFadden there, who played the entirety of the season. Really,
I'm on board with McFadden. Obviously,
I know, but I don't want to sell Dan Adebayo short because he's ready. Dan Adebayo can be a starting running back in this league. I would like to see.
I think he'll be the backup next year. I think and then when they go two back sets, I think he's going to get more run next year. I really do.
Yeah, no, he will be a factor next year offensively for the Argos. I still want to see. Everyone's obviously working in the offseason. I want to see him continue to work on pass protection. That's one area that I think he can still get better in. I love him as a ball carrier, though. And I think he's going to be a big part of Toronto's offense next year. The next two are kind of fun ones. Offensive player who could play defense and vice versa. Let's do that one first. Offensive player who could play defense. I'll go first because we're talking about the same guy. I think Adebayo would be a fantastic linebacker. Adebayo is so strong. He hits hard. He can tackle. We know that from special teams. And he's fast. I would love to put Adebayo out there as a linebacker. Levels that we've coached at, whether it's high school, semi-pro, we often have guys going both ways. And sometimes it's just for a game or two. You need an extra little boost. We in the national championship this year, we actually took one of our defensive linemen and brought him over to offense, took a corner, brought him to offense as well, just because we needed a little bit of something different. And so this happens. It doesn't happen a lot in the CFL. You see the occasional coach that'll try it out, but yeah, I would love to see. I'm not suggesting the Argos do this. I don't actually think that's a good idea in professional football, but I think Adebayo would make a fantastic linebacker. Who's your guy, JB?
Well, it's not often that an offensive guy can be brought over, but I think Ungerer would make a really nice little corner. I think that he is smart, knows the routes, twitchy, fearless, would be a missile in the air when it came to tackling. I think he is a football player all day. That's who he is, and I think that if he were thrown into to be an emergency corner, I think that he would hold his own.
I don't have his numbers up. I don't think he has got a great top speed. Like I don't think his 40 time was great, but I remember his 3-cone being like 6'8" or something like that, and I love that for a corner.
Yeah, like
and
the
aggression,
cover 2 corner.
yeah, that's the thing, right? Like you're not. I don't want him burning down the field with your ex receiver, but I like that pick a lot. That's good. Let's go to the other side. Defensive player who could play offense, and it takes a pretty special kind of defensive player to play offense, JB. I'm going to go with Darius Pickett.
We often send our special players over to offense.
Darius Pickett is such a talented guy. He unfortunately got a lot of criticism, sort of in jest, because everyone knows how valuable he was, but didn't have the picks that we thought pick 6 might. He did everything else, just didn't have the picks there. He has hands, though. I promise you, he's got hands. I know he dropped a couple picks, I'd love to see him out there. I think he's one of those slash guys. I think you could have him carrying the ball to the backfield. I'd love to see him on jets. I think he can be a gifted receiver despite the issues we apparently saw during the season. And Darius Pickett is my sort of gadget play guy on offense. Who are you going with?
Well, I do think Peters could be a red zone target. I think he's got good size to him. He's got good hands.
He does have good hands.
You know, you could put him in the mix. But for me, I'd love to see Hendricks play some offensive line as an emergency guy. You know, an emergency guard. I think he would hold his own.
I don't know if he's got the size. Like he's like 270 or something.
Yeah, I'd have to
see him as like a tight end.
He'd have to bulk up a little.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I like your Peters one better.
I mean, I'd love to see him in one-on-ones. I would love to see him in one-on-ones.
He's strong. He would tell you he could do it.
I know. I think
all these guys would, though. That's the thing. They all think they can play.
I would love to see him in one-on-ones. I would love to see that. I know coaches won't often do it, but I would love to see the defensive line flip and protect the quarterback. But I think Hendricks is super smart. He is a terrific football player. I think that if you needed him to be an emergency tackle, you know, I think he could do it. I think he's got the footwork and the ability to understand what's going down. Yeah, he's a little light, but that's okay.
I like your Peters pick better. I think Peters told me he played receiver in high school. I think I seem to remember that from last year. Maybe it was even 2 years ago. But yeah, and I do like his hands a lot. He's got such good length too. But I think that's actually a better choice from you. All right, into our next award, Best Haggerty. This was tough. Last year, Josh Haggerty took it, the safety winning it over the punter. And that was a tight competition last year. For me, this year, it's a little bit unfair because Josh Haggerty spent so much of the season injured. I know John Haggerty also went through some injuries, was able to come back. I think all in all, Josh won it last year. I think we probably got to give it to John this year just based on injury time missed. But Josh was not without value. He's really turned into something special on special teams. He's a great player. You can put him in there defensively. We saw him thrown in some really tough situations where he was coming up and being like the first guy in run defense. And that's not what he's built for. That's not what he's designed for. But he's a guy that will come and give you everything he's got on every play. And I love seeing him at practice too, where he's like he serves as the quarterback for the defense when teams are split up and the defense needs a guy who can throw. Haggerty has got an arm. And so tip of the hat to Josh Haggerty, but I think John Haggerty probably wins this. He was the best punter in the league this year. And so I think we have to give the Best Haggerty award to John Haggerty. Are you in agreement, JB?
Yeah, I think it's John's year. It's a prestigious award, and I'm happy to crown him Best Haggerty. Funny. Speaking of Haggerty, it did make me think of another choice that I had bandied about. Was
for the Haggerty award?
No, Beatty at defensive line.
Beatty at practice is like all the guys. These guys are such elite athletes. If you've never been to an Argo practice, you've got to check one out. They're generally open to fans to go and watch. They're so funny because these guys are so special as like just gifted athletes. They can all do things that just most human beings can't do, and so you'll see things like Beatty plays some quarterback. He's out there playing corner on the scout team. Like the guys all do a bunch of different things, and they all believe that they're CFL level at like every position. But then occasionally you'll catch things like earlier this year watching Qantas Stiggers try and out jump everybody in standing long jump and things like that. It's just it's a pretty special group. But yeah, Beatty can do it all. He can actually throw. He will tell you he's a good corner. I'm not so sure about that one. But
I hope they're able to bring him back at a good rate.
Me too. It's tough though because he counts as an American, which to me is maddening because he really should be he should be anything else, anything but an American, right? Like born in France, like school in Canada, like the I hate how that's set up, but yeah, that's just the way it is. And so it is a bit of a tougher one. If he were a global, man, the value there, or a Canadian, the value there, it's a little tougher as an American, but he also showed he's a guy that can do both punting and kicking.
I mean, I know the coaches love having him there. I can't imagine that they don't bring him back, because you don't want to go down that road of trying guys out, because it's just the worst. If you don't have an in-house replacement already, just pay the money and figure it out.
And our last award of 2023 is the Xs and Argos MVP. I decided to take this one literally and just look at who was the most valuable player on this team. And I think that's easy for me. It's Chad Kelly. I don't think there was a more valuable person. There are a lot of different ways we can take that award. And of course, there were guys that were, had value in their own way or made our lives more interesting or what have you. But I think if you just go with the season that he had and the numbers that he put up, the plays that he made, the highlights that he produced, and if you'd taken any one guy off this team, the team would have been able to survive any other position, but not a quarterback. Chad Kelly is my nominee for MVP. Where are you going, JB?
Well, not to be too predictable, but I go defensively here. I think that Chad Kelly had an amazing year. He was way beyond what we ever could have hoped from a first-year quarterback.
We thought he'd be good, but we thought there'd be games where we're like, "Whoa, man!"
I thought it'd be a lot rockier. I thought he played great and he made some great throws. But for me, over the course of the season, is Pickett. I think Pickett was he so often led the team in tackles. He was all over the field. He just led what I thought was by far the best defense in the league, and a defense that was still elite in the Eastern Final. This defense never gave up its elite title. It was an elite defense that unfortunately didn't get to finish the game. But for me, I think Pickett is the MVP. I thought he was the best player on the best defense in the league.
And another guy that the Argos didn't have a replacement for, and we saw that as well. Like when he went down, there wasn't an answer. And
if he doesn't play this year, it's a totally different season, because if their defense is not elite, it's a more kind of normal 10-11 win fight.
I can't really argue with that, but I think maybe our solution is to go with a dual hyphenated award and have both. We often do, as we've done that. Yes, you and I, we've done that before. Yeah,
the cowardly
choice. But we'll do that. Chad Kelly and Adarius Pickett, the Xs and Argos MVP for 2023. Well, JB, that will just about do it for us. Before we sign off, I just want to, we got a billion people to thank, and obviously we're not going to be able to do everything, but I really want to thank our sponsors. Something in the Water Brewing stepped up this year, and they were absolutely fantastic. They, from the start of the season through the end of the season, not only do they brew great beer, they held great events that our listeners were able to go to. It was just such a good time to be able to have a place too that we could go and hang out with our listeners pregame and talk football, talk Argos football. They were spectacular, and they don't close just because the season ends. So make sure you drop by Something in the Water Brewing. They've got some of their fall beer and their winter beer coming out as well. I love that they're continuously adding and trying stuff out and bringing out the curiosity in the beer drinker. And so make sure you check out X's and Argos. But yeah, everybody, from our sponsors to our listeners and the Toronto Argonauts, the CFL, and all the other writers and podcasters that have joined us in the press box as well and made our life so much more interesting, more fun, and helped us do what we do as well. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. It has meant a lot to us, and we have had another fantastic season. JB, we've been through it all. We started this thing with a 3-win Argo team. We saw a season with nothing, no football at all, and then an Eastern Final loss, a Grey Cup win, and now a heartbreak So we've got a little bit of everything, and we can only imagine what next year has in store. And thank you, JB. It has been a pleasure doing this with you again this year. I really enjoy that. We get to do this and sort of share the season together. So it has been fun.
Yeah, it's great. I look forward to my flight once I get out from feeling under the weather and being able to rejoin the public. I look forward to enjoying those cold, refreshing beverages.
We'll have to photo document that somehow and send that out on social media.
See what we can do about that.
Well, that will do it for us on this season finale edition of the Xs and Argos podcast. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see you.
Go, Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the foe.